Hello, and welcome to October Madness, a full month of creepy, dark, scary, but also cute and adorable Halloween-related tutorials, art projects, live streams, and many more video treats for your viewing and learning pleasure. October is a very special month for me. It starts with my wedding anniversary with this handsome guy, and it ends with Halloween and the date that I met this handsome guy. It's a month framed by celebrations and filled with my favorite kind of coloring, all things dark and spooky. Let's get this party started with Moonlight and skeletons. I originally planned to color this page for you explaining the different ways that you can make skeletons and bones in general interesting. And then I was invited to a Moonlight coloring event. So since this page already has a beautiful large moon, I decided to kill two birds with one stone. Teach you some tricks about bones and Moonlight, and complete a coloring page that I will submit to an event. Yep, I color for events too. By the way, the Moonlight event is happening in a Facebook group called Free to Color. Very cool group. I'll put the link in the description below for you. Meanwhile at Talm, my group, we're having the first of our Halloween events, so you want to check that out as well. Back to our coloring. Before I roll the time lapse of my actual coloring process, I want to take a moment to look over the finished piece and explain the effects that we're going for. While I am a huge fan of experimenting and trying different coloring techniques, and you will see me do so on this piece as well, I am also a firm believer in having a specific vision of the finished project in mind. It may not be a very clear vision, and it may change during the coloring process, but you should start every coloring knowing more or less what you want it to look like in the end. I started this one knowing that I want a blood moon, and I'll show you exactly what I did to achieve those effects. I wanted exaggerated moonbeams shining through the ribcage here, and I wanted my skeletons to be backlit by the moon in a way that makes it easy to see them. Having these three goals in mind, I began my coloring with, you guessed it, white charcoal, my favorite. I decided to work on tan-toned paper. I couldn't make up my mind between tan and gray for the longest time. Both would work fine for this design. The light of the moon and the bones can both have a grayish undertone to them, but I finally settled on tan because I knew that I wanted my moon to be a blood moon, therefore warm color palette, so tan just seemed like a friendlier option. Gray would have made the piece a bit gloomy, I think, and I was going for fun and cheerful. Festive even. This is a page from my book Knights and Mares Halloween, by the way. The link to that book is in the video description, and this specific illustration is also up on my Patreon page, along with some other really cool Halloween gift pages. So that's something else you may want to check out. But whether you're coloring this exact page or any other coloring page with the moon and or skeletons, the techniques I'm about to show you will apply just as well. My original plan was to do this whole page in white charcoal and color pencils. So I began by filling the moon completely with white, blending it with a Q-tip, and adding suggestions of directional glow that's peeking through the ribcage. I then proceeded to add soft layers of gray, yellow, orange, and red with color pencils. I was pleased with how the colors were laying on top of my white charcoal layer. Very smoothly, very delicately, too delicately. At this pace, it would have taken hours to get to the level of saturation that I envisioned in this blood moon. And that's when I had an epiphany, or rather a flashback. Just a week ago, I was working on a portrait and discovered that using acrylic paint over charcoal actually creates a really cool effect. Acrylic paint will be a lot faster too. It will allow for higher color saturation and will look smoother than pencils with all those little sketch marks. I'm painting with these acrylics almost the way that I would with watercolors. I have a small jar of water nearby, and I'm using a wet brush to apply the paint. For my colors, I'm using red, yellow ochre, and white. I'm not being super careful with the skeleton outlines here. I don't actually even care if I accidentally paint over parts of them with the moon colors. I'm going to color the skeletons separately after the moon is done, and whether I use pencils or acrylic paint for that, both will work perfectly fine over the layer of paint. Plus, I do actually want some glow of the moon to spill through the bones here and there. I like the orange and red tones that I'm getting on the moon, but I want to give it more definition. This is for a Moonlight event after all. I want to spend extra time making the moon look really special, bringing out every little crater and this dark spot on the side here. I'm using a combination of dark brown and dark blue for this area. I know a lot of you probably want to know at this point what kind of paint I'm using and which exact colors. And it's not even anything that I can put in a link for you. I just have some generic acrylic paints that I got from a local stationery store. I don't think they even have a brand. Just some nameless Chilean super cheap stuff, and I only have these exact colors. I bought white, yellow ochre, red, something that looked like ultramarine blue, and something that looked like dark umber. That's it. I got these for a craft project over a year ago. I'm a big fan of making use of what I have laying around. I once did a painting with just oil paint and eyeshadow, because that's all I had available. And it certainly had its limitations, but it turned out great in the end. So this is another example of how not having the exact brand pencils or paints shouldn't stop you from experimenting. Maybe you can't afford that giant pencil set this month. Or maybe you live in South America like me, and shipping stuff from Amazon takes 3 months to indefinitely. Whatever your situation might be, don't wait for that perfect product to make art. Just go for it with whatever you have laying around and see what happens. I guarantee you will learn something cool that you can later recreate with that fancy brand pencil. I'm sure glad I switched to paint now that I'm doing the background. This would have taken forever with pencils. And while I usually don't do the background at all, here I can't cut corners. When coloring the moon, a huge part of the moonlight illusion is the night sky itself. You do have to paint the background. Completely. All of it. In my case, I want the sky to be really dark for the blood moon to look especially vibrant. So I'm mixing blue, brown, and red to create what looks like black. I never use actual black when painting. I don't even own black paint. I always mix it. The mix that I create is nearly black, and because it's made up of 3 colors, it gives the illusion of depth. It's a nice trick to keep up your sleeve. Even the blackest night isn't really black. Go for dark blues and violets instead. If working in color pencil, use several layers to achieve this effect. It may seem like a horrible waste of time, but trust me, it goes a long way. The difference between solid black and deep multicolored blues is extraordinary, even if it's only perceived subconsciously. I noticed that working with acrylic paint and a wet brush on paper, even though it's a fairly thick paper, does wrinkle the page a bit. But as the paint dries, the page restores to its original state. Like magic. Now that the sky is sufficiently dark, I take a few minutes to work on the glow. Remember that the moonlight shining through the ribcage of my boy skeleton is one of my major effects that I want to achieve in this coloring. Glow effects are always tricky. It's tempting to put a glow gradient all around the moon, but I will actually leave the sky the way that it is and leave the moon the way that it is and only work on the glow in this one area that interests me. This way, the eye will be drawn to these beams. Would the moon glow actually look like this in real life? Well, even if we had skeletons dancing in front of the moon? No, probably not. I'm definitely not going for full realism here. Instead, I'm going for fantasy. And in that fantasy drawing and coloring style, it's totally okay to exaggerate certain effects a bit. I want the moon glow to almost be its own character here, so I will take extra steps to slightly overwork that element for dramatic effect. And now on to the skeletons. Just like with the moon, I want to start with a lighter layer. Even though bones are never exactly white, I'm using white because of the moonlight here, and also to create more contrast between the moon, the sky, and the skeletons. There's a lot going on here in terms of the amount of detail, and it's easy to lose all that detail if you don't create a sufficient degree of contrast. It almost doesn't matter what colors you use for the bones, as long as they stand out against the background. I'm using a white charcoal pencil here and a Q-tip to smooth out my glow gradient. The white charcoal pencil is working beautifully over my layer of acrylic paint. And this is the part that's the most fun for me, making the skeletons look backlit. It's always a tricky effect to accomplish. The simplest way to show backlit characters is to silhouette them, or just paint them black. That would work if they fit perfectly in front of the moon, but they don't. Their arms and their legs stretch beyond the edge of the moon and over the very dark sky. So if I were to just paint my skeletons black, I would first lose all the detail in the characters, and second, I would lose their arms and their legs in the night sky. Painting just the limbs that stick out beyond the moon white and leaving the torsos in front of the moon black would also not work, at least not in a way that I want. So I have to create very intricate gradients with the darkest parts of the skeletons being their centers along the spines, and gradually transition their limbs to lighter tones as they reach beyond the moon edge, until I get to the fingertips, which will be pure white for dramatic effect. I'm using a dark warm gray pencil for the dark parts of the skeletons. For a proper backlit effect, I'm keeping the center parts of the skulls and the spines the darkest, while leaving the edges light. That suggests the light that spills out around them. Once the shadows are done, I blend the white and the gray that I already have on the bones with a light gray pencil. I'm really glad that I went with tan paper here. It's the perfect undertone for bones. For the decorations, like the flowers and the top hat and the tie, I decided to go with yellow and red to accent the blood moon colors. I didn't plan this part out though. Little details like this come to me as I color. They're minor, and they sort of just fall into place as I'm coloring. A small but important detail on the top hat. It's also backlit, so I'm following the same coloring principles here as I did on the skull, keeping it darker in the center and lighter around the edges. Having discovered how beautifully pencils work over acrylic paint, I'm now adding just a bit more definition and color to the moon. And now a touch of solid black on the finer details on the skeletons to really bring out that contrast. I would never use black to color, but for these contrast touch-ups, it's perfect. But something's missing. It still doesn't feel 100% like a night sky. Stars! Of course, I need stars. Simple white charcoal pencil and tiny dots all around will do the trick. Dabs of acrylic paint would work too, so would a white gel pen. I really like painting the whole sky first and then adding the little white stars, instead of drawing out the little stars and trying to color all around them. I also don't ever add glow to the stars. I think just simple white dots on a nearly black background convey the night sky illusion perfectly. It's easy to overdo the shiny stars with twinkle effects, rays of light, halo glow auras. I just don't think that stuff is necessary. Here I actually took a dinner break, and when I came back I noticed that from a distance the arms and the legs are not actually clearly seen against the moon. So I added some more dark shadows here and there. In these final stages of the coloring process, it's all about the balance and tweaking little parts that may not look exactly the way that you wanted them to. I'm going over the whole thing looking for details that I might have missed and cleaning up the areas that are not as smooth as I think they should be. And for the final touch, I'm using a white gel pen to add tiny highlights, the individual bones on the hands and the feet, and thin moon glow outlines here and there. If all else fails, you can always count on a white gel pen to save the day. I start my coloring with white charcoal, but sometimes that's not enough. I like to be able to end with white gel pens and add the highlights that are too tiny and need to be pure white, something that white charcoal wouldn't be able to do at this point. And there you have it. I think that came out all right. I'm very pleased with my moon color and the glow effect. Going with acrylic paint was definitely a win, and it saved me a lot of time on the night sky. Incidentally, how long do you guys think the coloring took in real time? Let me know your guesses in the comments below, or on Facebook. If you're not already a member of my Facebook group Tom, come join us. There's a Halloween event going on right now with a free image provided, and there will be a second Halloween event starting in a couple of weeks. If you want to get your hands on this exact page, there are two ways that you can do that. You can find it in my coloring book Knights and Mares Halloween, or on Patreon. If you're not already a patron, what are you waiting for? We have a ton of fun there, and it's a great way to get free pages, exclusive videos, original art, personal lessons, and a ton more fun stuff. So come check it out and join the club. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please give it the thumbs up if you did, subscribe to my channel if you don't already, tell all your friends that this is the place to be, especially during the month of Halloween madness. I'm Lisa Mitrakin, and I have a wedding anniversary to celebrate. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye!